Hi, this is Russell, and welcome to the first Kiwi Development Solutions podcast for 2010. This episode will be part of a series that will explore the different phases of a church redevelopment project. I'll explore what is the catalyst for making a change through planning, design, and ultimately construction. In this episode, we will be looking at church design process, but really from a church's perspective. Advise people at the very beginning is to organize yourself well. And that really starts with an understanding of what the process ahead really is. So with getting organized really means getting informed. And this podcast is intended to provide some background information and kind of a general understanding of how a project will develop. This particular schedule is something that is made up from understandings of a previous project. So this project actually spans nearly 3.5 years from what is considered the start of a project, which is actually realizing that the church needs to make a change to its current accommodations, through to the end of construction. Now keep in mind this is only an example, so every project is different. So really the first thing that starts a project is this understanding that you don't have enough space, or the space that you have doesn't really meet the requirements. But space utilization is a true understanding of the way that a space is being used, by how many people, and for what activities. So now there's a realization that the church doesn't really meet the requirements of the different ministries and the activities that they are now doing. Now, depending on the magnitude of the project, this may require a fundraising exercise for the initial phases of the design component of the project. Then this fundraising exercise would cover costs associated for the design team through master planning or schematic design. Could go further depending on what the ultimate goal of the church really is. So really the first design orientated component of a project is actually programming. Now this is involving often very lengthy meetings with staff and the congregation, looks at the different ministries, looks at operations. So it's looking into the future requirements and needs for the ministries and for the church. This document does end up quite a lengthy document, and is outlining a numerical analysis of spaces and requirements for the future. So once the programming component has been completed, it allows some thought into how you really want to have the project best benefit the church. And this really starts with consideration of kind of two sides: design versus cost. Establishing a budget early in the project, in my mind, is critical to the success of a good project. So once you've established what your team looks like, really starting to master plan the project. This is obviously a further development from the programming document and space utilization, which is both data driven. Master planning is now really looking at how these spaces and the requirements for these spaces actually lay out. It's going to look at a macro view of the project, whether it's a site and how the site is best used, and then it steps itself in toward the rooms. There will also be a number of other documents and considerations that will come from this master plan. One of the considerations is the phasing of the project. That means that you will understand at this early stage what it will take to actually construct a piece-by-piece approach to redeveloping the entire church campus, for example. And finally, there is a budget that is again assigned to this master plan. Now, once you've established both those two categories, you are in a position as a church to actually develop a fundraising strategy in funding the construction. So at the completion of master planning, you now have an opportunity to make a decision as a church on whether you want to take the design further. And it really is based on the ability to fundraise and knowing your congregation and knowing your church. So you can take this to the next phase, which is actually the first level of refinement for the design, and that is called schematic design. Now it is looking at a lot more specific level of detail. It now reflects strongly back to the requirements of code and other government agencies that really require input at this stage. So here is a decision point for the church as to what is required and best serves the church for communicating what the design direction will be. This is really important to understand that at master planning there are some preliminary information. You will get a glimpse at the feel and look of a building of the change to the church, but at schematic design you get so much more. You will get design detail that will represent what the building really could look like when it's finished. So another consideration early in the design process is from an interior design standpoint. Often it is up to the church to organize certain equipment and furniture. This can be done by an interior designer or an architect that has an interior designer as part of his firm. But the reality is, think about it now, because when you think about interior design later in the process, it often is too late to effectively integrate furniture and equipment without going back through the design process. So all of the preceding phases of the design process really are further developments and further refinements of the design itself. The important thing to remember is at the end of that process, which is construction documents, there is now a set of documents, including specifications and drawings and so on, that can now be used for both permitting but also for construction. And this is really the switchover point between the emphasis being placed now onto the contractor, who is of course responsible for constructing the project. So construction is a phase obviously that there will be a degree of involvement by the owner and the architect and so on. The important thing here is that you as a church need to be aware that there are certain responsibilities that will be coming your way. If, for example, you are going to be responsible for furniture and equipment, then you need to make sure that that is ordered in a timely manner so that when the facility is actually completed, that you have actually the equipment and furniture in order to use the space effectively. Now, I've run through this process very quickly and I apologize, but the intent here is to lay out a schedule and a roadmap for the upcoming episodes. So episode 2 will start at the beginning of the schedule. We'll look at each of the steps in the journey in a lot more detail. Well, that's it for episode 1. I'd like to close by thanking all those that encouraged me in making this podcast, and welcome any comments that anyone has online. Thanks, and God bless.